The kitchen sink had been dripping for 3 weeks. Not the kind of dramatic waterfall that demands immediate attention, but that slow, methodical torture that drives you insane at 2 a.m. when you're lying in bed, counting each drop like a liquid metronome. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I was elbow deep in the cabinet under the sink, wrestling with a corroded pipe wrench, when I heard Lena's voice drifting down from upstairs. She was on the phone, speaking in that hushed tone she used when she thought I couldn't hear. "It worked, Carter. I'm pregnant. He doesn't know. We did it." The wrench slipped from my hands and clanged against the pipe. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape my chest. Nothing like a midnight plumbing job to hear your life go down the drain, I thought bitterly. I stayed perfectly still, straining to catch every word. The floorboards above creaked as Lena paced, something she always did when she was nervous or excited. Tonight, it sounded like both. "No, Carter, he has no idea. I told you, Jake's been so busy with work lately. He barely notices anything. The timing is perfect." Perfect for what? My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Lena and I had been married for 8 years. We had 2 kids, Emma, 10, and Tyler, 7. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I thought we were solid. Apparently, I was wrong. I know. Vanessa can't suspect anything either. This has to look completely natural when we tell them. Tell them what? That my wife was pregnant with her ex-boyfriend's baby? That the woman I'd built a life with had been sneaking around behind my back? I carefully extracted myself from under the sink, moving like a cat burglar in my own house. The stairs creaked under my weight as I crept upward, following the sound of Lena's voice. She was in our bedroom, door cracked open just enough for me to see her silhouette against the window. "The clinic won't be a problem," she was saying. "I'm the operations director. I can handle the paperwork, make everything look legitimate. Surrogacy agreements, medical records, everything." Surrogacy. The word hit me like a physical blow. Lena worked at Riverside Fertility Clinic downtown, had for the past 5 years. She'd climbed the ranks quickly, impressing everyone with her organizational skills and attention to detail. Now I understood why she'd been working so many late nights lately. "Carter, stop worrying. Jake trusts me completely. He'll believe whatever I tell him. And even if he gets suspicious, what's he gonna do? He makes $42,000 a year fixing HVAC systems. You're a partner at Morrison, Blake & Associates. Who do you think people will believe?" The casual cruelty in her voice stung more than the betrayal itself. I made decent money as an HVAC technician, enough to keep our family comfortable in our modest 3-bedroom house in Millfield. But compared to Carter's law firm salary, I might as well have been flipping burgers. Carter Williams? I remembered him from Lena's college stories, the golden boy who'd broken her heart senior year by choosing law school over their relationship. She'd claimed she was over him, that marrying me was the best decision she'd ever made. Another lie to add to the growing pile. "I have to go," Lena whispered. "Jake's downstairs fixing something. I'll call you tomorrow after my doctor's appointment. We need to coordinate our stories before we tell Jake and Vanessa." I heard the soft beep of her phone ending the call, followed by the rustle of sheets as she climbed back into bed. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, processing what I'd just learned. My wife was pregnant with another man's child, planning to pass it off as a surrogacy arrangement to help her ex-boyfriend and his wife have a family. The really twisted part? She was probably going to make me complicit in the whole thing, expecting me to support her through the pregnancy, to help raise Carter's child as if it were some noble act of charity. I went back downstairs and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the half-fixed sink. The drip had stopped, but now I had a much bigger leak to deal with. My marriage was hemorrhaging trust, and I wasn't sure it could be repaired. The next morning arrived with the brutal cheerfulness that only a New England autumn could deliver. Bright orange leaves danced outside our kitchen window, while I made coffee and tried to pretend my world hadn't imploded 12 hours earlier. Lena came downstairs wearing her favorite blue dress, the one that made her eyes look like sapphires. She was glowing, practically radiating happiness, and I had to admit, she looked beautiful. Pregnancy suited her, even if the circumstances made my stomach turn. "Morning, honey," she said, kissing my cheek with the same casual affection she'd shown me for 8 years. "How's the sink?" "Fixed," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Took longer than expected, but it's working now." She poured herself a cup of coffee, then immediately set it down without drinking. "Actually, I need to talk to you about something important." Here it comes, I thought. The performance begins. "I've been thinking a lot lately about how blessed we are," Lena began, settling into the chair across from me. "We have 2 beautiful children, good health, a nice home. Not everyone is so fortunate." I nodded, waiting for her to get to the point. "You remember Carter Williams from college? He's married now to a wonderful woman named Vanessa. They've been trying to have children for years, but Vanessa has some medical issues that make pregnancy impossible for her." Lena's eyes filled with tears, real ones, as far as I could tell. She'd always been good at crying on command. "They're devastated, Jake. They have so much love to give, so much they want to share with a child. And I keep thinking about how easy our pregnancies were, how grateful we should be." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were warm and soft, the same hands that had held mine on our wedding day, the same hands that had cradled our newborn children. "I've decided to be a surrogate for them," she said quietly. "Carter and Vanessa can't have children, and I want to help them. I want to give them the gift of a family." I stared at her, genuinely impressed by the performance. If I hadn't overheard her phone call, I might have believed her. The tears, the trembling voice, the way she squeezed my hand, it was all perfectly choreographed. "That's a big decision," I said carefully. "Have you thought about what it would mean for our family? The pregnancy, the medical appointments, the emotional attachment?" "Of course I have. But Jake, this feels right. It feels like something I'm meant to do. Carter and Vanessa are good people who deserve to be parents." Good people, right. Good people who were manipulating my wife into carrying their child while destroying my marriage in the process. "When would this happen?" I asked. Lena's cheeks flushed pink. "Well, actually, I've already started the process. I'm pregnant, Jake, 8 weeks along." I let the silence stretch between us, watching her face carefully. She was nervous now, probably wondering why I wasn't reacting with more surprise or emotion. 8 weeks, I repeated. "That's interesting timing. When exactly did you start this process?" "A few months ago. The legal paperwork, medical evaluations, psychological assessments, it takes time to do everything properly." More lies. I wondered how many others she'd told over the past few months, how many times she'd looked me in the eye and deceived me without blinking. "I'm proud of you," I said finally, forcing a smile. "It takes a special person to make such a selfless sacrifice for friends." The relief on her face was palpable. "Really? You're okay with this?" "More than okay. I think it's beautiful that you're helping Carter and Vanessa start their family." She threw her arms around me, and I held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. For a moment, it almost felt like the old days, before I knew what she really was. "I love you so much," she whispered against my neck. "I love you too," I replied, and meant it. That was the most twisted part of all. Despite everything, I still loved her. But love and trust were 2 different things, and she'd shattered the latter beyond repair. Mick's boxing gym occupied the bottom floor of an old brick factory building on the south side of town, where the neighborhoods got grittier and the rent got cheaper. The place smelled like sweat, leather, and the dreams of men who'd learned that life hits harder than any opponent in the ring. I'd been coming here for 3 years, Ever since my doctor told me I needed to find a better way to manage stress than drinking beer and yelling at football games. What started as cardio had evolved into something more serious. I could hold my own in the ring now, and the physical exhaustion helped quiet the noise in my head. Mick Torino was a former Golden Gloves champion who'd opened the gym after a career-ending injury in his early 30s. He was built like a fire hydrant, all muscle and scar tissue, with hands that looked like they'd been carved from oak. More importantly, he had the kind of street wisdom that came from growing up in neighborhoods where survival required both intelligence and toughness. "You're hitting like you're mad at the bag," Mick observed as I worked over the heavy bag with more aggression than usual. "What's eating you, Jake?" I paused, wiping sweat from my forehead. The gym was mostly empty. Just me, Mick, and Tommy Castellano, a plumber who came in during his lunch breaks to stay in shape. "Lena's pregnant," I said, testing the words aloud. "Congratulations, man," Tommy called from across the gym. "That's great news." "It's not mine," I added quietly, so only Mick could hear. Mick's expression didn't change, but I saw something shift in his eyes. He'd been around long enough to hear every sob story, every tale of betrayal and heartbreak that men carried into his gym. "You sure about that?" he asked. "Positive. She's carrying a baby for her ex-boyfriend and his wife. Claims it's surrogacy, helping them start a family." "Claims?" I told him about the phone call, about the way Lena had presented the situation as a noble act of charity. Mick listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or grunting in acknowledgement. "So what are you going to do?" he asked when I finished. "I don't know. Part of me wants to confront her, demand the truth, but another part of me is curious to see how far she'll take this lie." "Dangerous game," Mick warned. "The longer you let it play out, the deeper the hole gets." Tommy had stopped his workout and drifted over, clearly sensing drama. "Wait, what's this about surrogacy?" Before I could stop him, Mick filled Tommy in on the basics. Within minutes, the story was spreading through the gym's informal network. By tomorrow, half the neighborhood would know that Jake Morrison's wife was carrying another man's baby. "That's cold, man," Tommy said, shaking his head. "Using surrogacy as a cover for an affair? That's next-level deception." "We don't know it's an affair," I protested, though the words felt hollow. "Come on, Jake," Mick said. "You think they used a turkey baster? You said she was glowing, right? Women don't glow from artificial insemination. They glow from good sex with someone they're excited about." The truth of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd been trying to convince myself that maybe, somehow, this really was just surrogacy. But deep down, I knew better. "The question is," Mick continued, "what kind of man are you going to be? The kind who gets played and pretends everything's fine, or the kind who fights back?" "I'm not going to do anything stupid," I said. "Stupid would be letting them walk all over you. Smart would be making sure they pay for what they're doing." Over the next few days, I found myself paying closer attention to Lena's behavior, looking for cracks in her performance. She was good. I had to give her credit for that. She played the role of the selfless surrogate perfectly, talking about Carter and Vanessa with just the right mix of sympathy and determination. But there were tells. The way she smiled when she thought I wasn't looking. The extra care she took with her appearance. The new clothes that appeared in her closet. Maternity wear that was far more expensive than anything we could afford on my salary. "Carter insisted on paying for everything," she explained when I asked about a designer dress that probably cost more than I made in a week. "He feels terrible about putting me through this, so he wants to make sure I'm comfortable." "That's generous of him," I replied. "He's a good man, Jake. Both he and Vanessa are. I'm so glad we can help them." The really infuriating part was how everyone else seemed to buy into the story completely. Lena's friends praised her selflessness. Our neighbors talked about what a wonderful thing she was doing. Even my own mother called to tell me how proud she was of Lena's generosity. "Not many women would make such a sacrifice," Mom said during one of our weekly phone calls. You married a special one, Jake. If only she knew. The breaking point came 2 weeks later at Emma's parent-teacher conference. Lena had been feeling tired, so I offered to go alone, but she insisted on coming. I don't want to miss anything about our daughter's education, she said. We arrived at Roosevelt Elementary to find the parking lot packed with minivans and SUVs. Inside, the hallways buzzed with the controlled chaos of parents navigating between classrooms, trying to cram 6 months of their children's academic progress into 15-minute time slots. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, was a veteran educator in her 50s who'd seen everything the public school system could throw at her. She greeted us with a warm smile and launched into a detailed report about Emma's progress in reading and math. She's doing wonderfully, Mrs. Patterson concluded. Emma's a bright girl with a lot of potential. You should be very proud. We are, Lena said, placing her hand on her still small bump. We want all our children to have the best opportunities possible. Oh, congratulations, Mrs. Patterson exclaimed. I didn't know you were expecting again. It's actually a bit more complicated than that, Lena began, and I knew she was about to launch into her surrogacy story. I'm carrying a baby for some dear friends who can't have children of their own. Mrs. Patterson's expression shifted to one of admiration. How wonderful. That's such a generous thing to do. As Lena told the story, I noticed we were attracting attention from other parents in the hallway. Word spread quickly in small communities, and by the time we left the school, I could feel the weight of dozens of curious stares. People are really impressed, Lena said as we walked to the car. I think what we're doing is inspiring them. What we're doing. As if I were an active participant in this deception instead of an unwitting victim. That night, I lay in bed listening to Lena's steady breathing and made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her directly. Not yet. Instead, I was going to gather information. I was going to find out exactly how deep this conspiracy went, who else was involved, and what they thought they were going to accomplish. Then, when I had all the facts, I was going to make them pay for what they'd done to me, to my family, and to my children. After all, if Lena wanted to play games, I could play too, and I was about to show her that I was much better at it than she'd ever imagined. Carter Williams lived in Riverside Heights, the kind of neighborhood where the houses had names instead of just addresses, and the driveways were longer than most people's entire yards. His place was a colonial revival with white columns and black shutters, surrounded by perfectly manicured landscaping that probably cost more to maintain than I made in 6 months. I sat in my work van across the street, pretending to check invoices while I watched his house. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I'd told my boss I had a maintenance call in the area. Technically true. I was maintaining my sanity by gathering intelligence on the man who was destroying my marriage. At 3:47 p.m., a silver Mercedes pulled into the circular driveway. Carter emerged wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. He was tall and lean, with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money or consequences. But what really caught my attention was the woman who got out of the passenger seat. Blonde, elegant, wearing a cream-colored dress that screamed expensive. This had to be Vanessa, the supposedly infertile wife who was so desperate for a child that she'd convinced her husband to manipulate my wife into carrying their baby. Except, she didn't look desperate. She looked radiant, happy, like a woman who was getting exactly what she wanted. I watched them walk to the front door together, Carter's hand on the small of her back in a gesture that seemed genuinely affectionate. Either they were both excellent actors, or there was more to this story than I understood. My phone buzzed with a text from Lena. Running late at clinic. Can you pick up kids from school? I started the van and headed toward Roosevelt Elementary, my mind churning with questions. If Vanessa really couldn't have children, why did she look so happy and healthy? If this was really about helping infertile friends, why all the secrecy and deception? Emma and Tyler were waiting by the flagpole when I arrived, backpacks slung over their shoulders, faces bright with the particular energy that kids had at the end of a school day. "Dad!" Tyler called, running toward the van. "Guess what happened in science class?" As my son launched into an animated description of a volcano experiment, I felt a familiar stab of guilt. Whatever was happening between Lena and Carter, my kids were innocent victims. They didn't deserve to have their family torn apart by adult selfishness and lies. "Where's Mom?" Emma asked as we drove home. "Working late at the clinic," I replied. "She's been doing that a lot lately." "Because of the baby?" Emma was 10, old enough to understand the basics of what was happening, but young enough to accept the official story without question. "Yeah, because of the baby. I think it's really cool that Mom's helping someone have a family," Emma continued. "My friend Sarah's mom had trouble having babies too. She said it made her really sad." "It is cool," I agreed, hating myself for perpetuating the lie but not wanting to burden my daughter with the ugly truth. That evening, while Lena was at another late meeting, I decided to do some research. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, ostensibly paying bills, but actually diving into the digital footprints of everyone involved in this situation. Carter Williams was easy to find. Morrison, Blake & Associates had a professional website with partner biographies, and Carter's photo smiled back at me from the screen. Harvard Law School, specializing in corporate litigation, member of the country club, volunteer with several local charities. The picture of success and respectability. Vanessa Williams was harder to track down, but social media eventually yielded results. Her Instagram account was private, but her Facebook page showed glimpses of a life filled with charity galas, wine tastings, and exotic vacations. No mention of fertility struggles or desperate desires for children. What I did find were photos from a charity event 6 months ago, pictures of Carter and Vanessa at a fundraiser for the local children's hospital. They looked happy, successful, complete, not like a couple struggling with infertility. I dug deeper, searching for any mention of fertility treatments, surrogacy arrangements, or medical issues. Nothing. If Vanessa Williams had fertility problems, she was keeping them remarkably quiet. My research was interrupted by the sound of Lena's car in the driveway. I quickly closed the laptop and grabbed a stack of bills, arranging them on the table as if I'd been working on our finances. "Sorry I'm so late," Lena said, dropping her purse on the counter. "We had an emergency at the clinic. A patient went into premature labor and I had to coordinate with the hospital." She looked tired, stressed, like someone who'd actually been dealing with a medical emergency. Either she was an incredible actress, or she really had been working late. "How are you feeling?" I asked, gesturing toward her bump. "Good. Tired, but good. The baby's very active tonight." She placed both hands on her stomach, smiling with what looked like genuine maternal affection. That smile bothered me more than anything else. If this was all an elaborate deception, why did she look so genuinely happy about the pregnancy? Was she actually developing feelings for Carter's child? Or was she just that good at lying to herself as well as to me? "I was thinking," I said carefully, "maybe we should have Carter and Vanessa over for dinner sometime. Get to know them better, since we're all going to be connected through this baby." Lena's smile faltered for just a moment. "Oh, I don't think that's necessary. They're very private people, and this situation is already emotionally complicated for them. I think it's better if we keep some boundaries." Boundaries. Right. Can't have the husband getting too close to the truth. "I understand," I said. "I just thought it might be nice to meet the people we're helping." "Maybe after the baby's born," Lena said quickly. "When things are less emotional." After the baby's born. When the deception would be complete and there'd be no going back. I nodded and smiled, playing the part of the understanding husband. But inside, I was making plans. If Lena wanted to keep me away from Carter and Vanessa, there had to be a reason. And I was going to find out what it was. The next day, I called in a favor from my friend Danny, who worked for a private investigation firm downtown. We'd gone to high school together, and he owed me for helping him move apartments the previous year. I need you to look into someone, I told him over lunch at Murphy's Deli. Quietly. Danny was a thin, nervous guy who'd found his calling in the shadows of other people's lives. He had a talent for uncovering secrets and a flexible relationship with privacy laws. Personal or professional? He asked. Personal. My wife says she's carrying a baby for some friends who can't have kids. I want to know if that's really what's happening. Danny nodded knowingly. Surrogacy can be complicated. Lots of legal and emotional issues. What makes you suspicious? I told him about the phone call, the secrecy, the expensive clothes, and the general feeling that something wasn't right. Danny listened without judgment. He'd heard worse stories, I was sure. Give me names and addresses, he said. I'll see what I can find. How long will it take? A week, maybe 2. Depends on how careful they've been about covering their tracks. As I drove back to work, I felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. Part of me hoped Danny would find evidence that I was wrong, that Lena really was just helping infertile friends and I was being paranoid and suspicious. But a bigger part of me knew that wasn't going to happen. The pieces of this puzzle were starting to fit together, and the picture they were forming was uglier than I'd imagined. I just hoped I was strong enough to handle the truth when it finally came to light. Danny's call came on a Thursday morning while I was installing a new furnace in a McMansion on the north side of town. I stepped outside to take it, the October air sharp against my face. We need to meet, he said without preamble. I found some things you're not going to like. An hour later, we sat in his car in the parking lot of a strip mall, Danny spreading photographs and documents across the dashboard like evidence in a crime scene. Your wife's been busy, he began, handing me a series of photos. These were taken over the past 2 weeks. The first photo showed Lena and Carter having lunch at Romano's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. They were sitting close together, Carter's hand covering hers on the table. The second showed them walking out of the Riverside Hotel, Carter's arm around her waist. The third was taken through a window, the two of them in what was clearly a hotel room, embracing. There's more, Danny said, producing a manila folder. Financial records, phone records, hotel receipts. Your wife and Carter Williams have been having an affair for at least 6 months. The pregnancy timing matches up perfectly. I stared at the photos, feeling strangely detached from my own emotions. Seeing the evidence should have made me angry, but instead I felt a cold, calculating clarity settling over me. What about Vanessa? I asked. That's where it gets interesting, Danny said. Vanessa Williams filed for divorce 3 weeks ago, citing adultery and irreconcilable differences. She's asking for half of everything plus alimony. She knows about the affair? Oh, she knows. According to my source at the law firm, she hired her own private investigator months ago. She's been building a case, gathering evidence. Your wife and her husband walked right into a trap. I studied the photos again, seeing them in a new light. Carter and Lena thought they were being clever, using surrogacy as a cover story. But they'd been sloppy, careless, too caught up in their romance to notice they were being watched. There's something else, Danny continued. Vanessa Williams isn't infertile, never has been. She chose not to have children with Carter because she was already planning to leave him. She's been moving assets, setting up her exit strategy for over a year. The scope of the deception was breathtaking. Carter thought he was playing me, but Vanessa was playing all of us. She'd let her husband have his affair, probably encouraged it, knowing it would give her grounds for a lucrative divorce. What are you going to do? Danny asked. I don't know yet, I replied, but that wasn't entirely true. Ideas were already forming in my mind, plans that would require careful timing and absolute precision. That evening I sat at the dinner table with my family, watching Lena serve spaghetti and meatballs while she chatted about her day at the clinic. She looked radiant, glowing with the kind of happiness that came from being in love. Too bad it wasn't with her husband. How are Carter and Vanessa doing? I asked casually. This must be an exciting time for them. Lena's fork paused halfway to her mouth. They're doing well. Nervous but excited. It's a big step for them. I bet. Starting a family changes everything. Yes, it does. She smiled at me across the table, and for a moment I almost forgot she was lying. I'm so grateful we can help them. After dinner, while Lena helped the kids with homework, I went to the basement and opened the safe where I kept our important documents. Birth certificates, social security cards, insurance policies, bank account information, the paper trail of our life together. I photographed everything with my phone, then uploaded the images to a secure cloud account. If I was going to war, I needed to protect my assets and my children's future. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Patricia Henley had handled our house closing 8 years earlier, and I'd kept her card in my wallet ever since. She was a small-town attorney with a big-city education, the kind of person who could navigate complex legal situations without breaking a sweat. "Jake," she said when I walked into her office, "it's been a long time. What can I do for you?" "I need to discuss divorce options," I said. Hypothetically. Patricia's expression shifted to professional concern. "What's the situation?" I told her everything: the affair, the fake surrogacy, the financial deception, the impact on our children. She listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. "This is complicated," she said when I finished. "The pregnancy adds a layer of complexity, especially if your wife is claiming the child isn't yours." "What are my options?" "Several. We can file for divorce on grounds of adultery, seek primary custody of your children, and pursue a favorable property settlement. The fact that she's been deceptive about the pregnancy will work in your favor." "What about the baby?" "If it's not biologically yours, you have no legal obligation to support it. In fact, given the circumstances, I'd recommend a paternity test as soon as possible after birth." We spent an hour discussing strategy, timelines, and potential outcomes. By the time I left her office, I had a clear plan and a retainer agreement in my briefcase. But legal action was only part of what I had in mind. Carter and Lena had humiliated me publicly, turning me into the neighborhood cuckold while they played their romantic games. They deserved more than just divorce papers and custody battles. They deserved to be exposed for what they really were. That weekend, Lena announced she was going to a baby shower for one of her coworkers. She left the house wearing a new dress and carrying an expensive gift bag, looking like she was heading to a celebration rather than a work obligation. I waited 30 minutes, then drove to the address she'd given me. The house was dark, no cars in the driveway, no signs of a party. Another lie to add to the collection. I knew where she really was. The Riverside Hotel, room 237, registered under Carter's name. Danny had given me the details along with everything else. Instead of confronting them, I drove to Mick's gym. I needed to hit something, and the heavy bag was safer than the alternatives my anger was suggesting. "You look like hell," Mick observed as I wrapped my hands. "Feel like it, too." I told him about Danny's investigation, about the photos and the financial records and the divorce papers I'd soon be filing. Mick listened while I worked the bag, throwing combinations with increasing violence. "So what's the plan?" he asked. "Legal divorce, custody battle, public exposure. I want everyone to know what they did." "That's good," Mick said, "but it's not enough." "What do you mean?" "They embarrassed you, Jake. Made you look like a fool in front of the whole neighborhood. Legal consequences are fine, but they won't restore your reputation. For that, you need something more creative." "Like what?" Mick smiled, and there was something predatory in his expression. "Like giving them a taste of their own medicine. They want to play games? Let's show them how the game really works." As I drove home that evening, Mick's words echoed in my mind. Legal justice was important, but it was also slow and impersonal. What I really wanted was for Carter and Lena to experience the same humiliation they'd inflicted on me. I wanted them to know what it felt like to have their lives fall apart while everyone watched. and I was starting to get some ideas about how to make that happen. The plan came together over the next 2 weeks, piece by piece, like a puzzle I'd been working on for months. Every detail had to be perfect, every timing precise. I was going to give Carter and Lena exactly what they deserved, and I was going to do it in a way that would leave them completely defenseless. Step 1 was financial. I quietly moved our joint savings into an account that only I could access, citing concerns about identity theft. I removed Lena from our insurance policies, claiming I was updating beneficiary information. I changed the locks on the house while she was at work, telling the kids I was upgrading our security system. "Why do we need new locks?" Emma asked, as I showed her how to use the new key. "Just being careful, sweetheart. There have been some break-ins in the neighborhood." Step 2 was social. I started making phone calls, casual conversations with neighbors, friends, and coworkers. I didn't tell them the truth directly. That would come later. Instead, I planted seeds of doubt, asked innocent questions that would make them start paying attention. "Have you seen Lena and that lawyer friend of hers around town?" I asked Mrs. Chen from next door. "They seem to be spending a lot of time together for a surrogacy arrangement." "It does seem unusual," she agreed. "But I'm sure it's all perfectly innocent." "Oh, I'm sure it is," I replied. "I just want to make sure Lena's not being taken advantage of. These wealthy types sometimes think they can do whatever they want." Step 3 was the most important, gathering an audience. I needed witnesses for what was coming, people who would spread the story throughout our community. The annual Millfield Community Center fundraiser was perfect, a dinner dance that drew hundreds of local families, including most of our friends and neighbors. Lena was excited about the event. "It'll be nice to get dressed up and go out together," she said, modeling a new maternity gown that probably cost more than my weekly salary. "Carter bought this for me. He said Vanessa wanted to make sure I looked beautiful." "You always look beautiful," I said, and meant it. Even knowing what she'd done, I couldn't deny that pregnancy made her radiant. "I love you, Jake," she said, kissing me softly. "I know this situation has been stressful, but I want you to know how much I appreciate your support." The irony was almost unbearable. She was thanking me for supporting her affair. The night of the fundraiser, I wore my best suit and played the part of the devoted husband. We arrived at the community center to find it decorated with autumn leaves and twinkling lights, filled with the kind of people who made up the backbone of our small city. "Jake! Lena!" called out Margaret Thompson, the event organizer. "So wonderful to see you both. Lena, you look absolutely glowing." "Thank you," Lena replied, placing her hand on her bump. "I feel wonderful." We mingled for an hour, accepting congratulations and praise for Lena's generous sacrifice. I smiled and nodded, playing my role perfectly while I waited for the right moment. That moment came when I spotted Carter Williams near the bar, looking uncomfortable in his expensive tuxedo. He was alone. Apparently, Vanessa had decided not to attend, probably because she was busy with divorce preparations. "Excuse me for a moment," I told Lena. "I want to grab us some drinks." I approached Carter with a friendly smile, extending my hand in greeting. "You must be Carter. I'm Jake Morrison, Lena's husband." His face went pale, but he shook my hand. "Nice to meet you, Jake. Lena's told me so much about you." "All good things, I hope." I signaled the bartender for 2 glasses of wine. "I wanted to thank you for taking such good care of my wife during this pregnancy. The clothes, the medical appointments, the hotel visits. It's very generous." Carter's hand trembled slightly as he lifted his drink. "It's the least we can do. Lena is giving us such an incredible gift." "She certainly is." I raised my glass in a toast. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," he echoed, but his voice cracked slightly. I left him at the bar and returned to Lena, who was deep in conversation with a group of women from her book club. They were discussing pregnancy symptoms and baby names, treating her like an expectant mother rather than a surrogate. "Ladies," I said, joining the circle, "mind if I borrow my wife for a dance?" The band was playing a slow song, and couples filled the dance floor. I took Lena in my arms, feeling the slight swell of her belly against my chest. "Having a good time?" she asked. "The best," I replied. "I met Carter at the bar. Interesting guy." "Oh?" Her body tensed slightly. "What did you think of him?" "He seems nervous, almost guilty about something, but I suppose that's natural. This whole situation must be emotionally complicated for everyone involved." "Yes," she agreed quickly. "Very complicated." We danced in silence for a moment, and I felt a strange sadness wash over me. This was probably the last time we'd danced together as husband and wife. Despite everything she'd done, part of me would miss moments like this. "Lena," I said softly, "is there anything you want to tell me? Anything at all?" She looked up at me with those sapphire eyes, and for a moment I thought she might confess everything. Instead, she smiled and said, "Just that I love you, and I'm grateful for your support." The song ended, and I led her back to our table. "I need to step outside for some air," I said. "Too many people in here." "I'll come with you." "No, stay and enjoy the party. I'll be right back." I walked outside into the crisp October night and pulled out my phone. Danny was waiting in the parking lot with a laptop and a portable projector, equipment I'd rented for a work presentation. "You sure about this?" he asked as we set up the equipment. "Absolutely sure." We positioned the projector to display images on the white wall of the community center, visible through the large windows that faced the parking lot. Danny had prepared a slideshow of the photos he'd taken. Lena and Carter at restaurants, hotels, embracing in private moments. "Give me 5 minutes to get back inside," I said. "Then start the show." I returned to the fundraiser and found Lena exactly where I'd left her, chatting with friends and basking in their admiration. Carter was still at the bar, drinking heavily and checking his phone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, stepping up to the microphone on the small stage, "could I have your attention for a moment?" The crowd quieted, turning toward me with polite curiosity. Margaret Thompson looked puzzled. I wasn't on the program for any speeches. "I know this is unusual," I continued, "but I wanted to take a moment to talk about something very important to me. My wife Lena is pregnant, carrying a child for some dear friends who can't have children of their own." Applause filled the room. Lena smiled and waved, clearly enjoying the attention. "It's such a beautiful thing," I said, "when people are willing to sacrifice for others, to put aside their own needs and desires to help friends in need. The generosity of spirit, the selflessness, the pure love required for such an act. It's truly inspiring." More applause. I saw Carter trying to edge toward the exit, but the crowd was too thick. "Of course," I continued, "surrogacy can be complicated. There are legal issues, medical concerns, emotional challenges. Sometimes the lines between helping friends and helping yourself can get a little blurred." The applause died down. People were starting to sense that something was off. "For instance," I said, gesturing toward the windows, "you might wonder what the difference is between surrogacy and adultery." The projector clicked on outside, casting the first image onto the wall. Lena and Carter at Romano's, holding hands across the table. Gasps echoed through the room as people turned to look. "You might wonder," I continued, my voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent room, "whether helping friends have a baby requires quite so many romantic dinners." Click. The next image showed them walking into the Riverside Hotel. Or quite so many intimate hotel visits. Click. Carter's arm around Lena's waist as they entered the hotel room. Or quite so much physical affection between a surrogate and her client. The room erupted in shocked murmurs and pointing fingers. I saw Lena's face go white, saw Carter pushing desperately through the crowd toward the exit. "The beautiful thing about truth," I said into the microphone, "is that it always comes to light eventually. My wife isn't carrying a baby for friends in need. She's carrying a baby for her lover, and they've been lying to everyone, including me, for months." Lena was crying now, her hands pressed to her face as friends and neighbors stared at her in shock and disgust. Carter had reached the door, but he wasn't fast enough to escape the humiliation. "So please," I concluded, "join me in congratulating the happy couple on their new family. I'm sure they'll be very happy together, assuming Carter's wife doesn't take everything in the divorce." I set down the microphone and walked off the stage, leaving chaos in my wake. People were shouting, pointing, taking pictures with their phones. The story would be all over social media within hours, spreading through our community like wildfire. I found Lena in the bathroom, sobbing into a handful of paper towels. When she saw me, her expression shifted from grief to fury. "How could you do this to me?" she demanded. "In front of everyone we know?" "I didn't do anything to you," I replied calmly. "I just told the truth. You and Carter did this to yourselves. This will ruin everything, my job, my reputation, our children's lives. You should have thought of that before you decided to have an affair and lie about it." She stared at me with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. "You're not the man I married." "No," I agreed. "The man you married was naive enough to trust you. Consider this my graduation." I left her there and walked out into the parking lot, where Danny was packing up the projector. The fundraiser was breaking up early, people streaming out of the building in excited clusters, already spreading the story. "Feel better?" Danny asked. "Much better," I replied, and realized it was true. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again, not the victim of someone else's deception, but the author of my own story. Carter and Lena had played their game and lost. Now it was time for them to live with the consequences. By Monday morning, the story had spread throughout the entire city. My phone rang constantly with calls from friends, neighbors, and co-workers expressing their support and outrage on my behalf. Lena's affair became the scandal of the season, discussed in coffee shops, beauty salons, and school pickup lines. Carter's law firm placed him on administrative leave, pending an investigation into his conduct. Lena was fired from the fertility clinic for violating professional ethics. Their reputations were destroyed, their careers in ruins, their relationship exposed as the selfish deception it had always been. I filed for divorce the following week, seeking primary custody of Emma and Tyler and a favorable division of our assets. Given the circumstances, Patricia was confident we'd get everything we asked for. "They have no leverage," she explained. "No sympathy from the court or the community. You hold all the cards now." The best part was watching Carter and Lena try to salvage their relationship amid the wreckage of their lives. Without the thrill of secrecy and deception, their romance quickly soured. They fought constantly, each blaming the other for their downfall. Carter's divorce from Vanessa was finalized within 2 months, costing him half his assets and substantial alimony payments. Lena moved in with him, but the relationship was doomed from the start. The baby that was supposed to represent their love became a symbol of their mutual destruction. 6 months later, I was a single father with primary custody of my children, living in our family home while Lena and Carter struggled to make ends meet in a cramped apartment across town. Emma and Tyler adapted well to the new arrangement, understanding that sometimes adults make bad choices and families have to change. "Are you happy, Dad?" Emma asked one evening as we worked on her math homework. "I'm getting there, sweetheart," I replied. "Sometimes it takes time to rebuild after something breaks. Like when I broke my bike and you helped me fix it? Exactly like that." As I tucked my children into bed that night, I reflected on everything that had happened. Carter and Lena had tried to play me for a fool, to use me as cover for their selfish desires. They'd underestimated the quiet man who fixed their furnace and paid their bills, assuming I was too weak or too stupid to fight back. They'd learned otherwise. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting even. and sometimes getting even means simply telling the truth and letting the consequences unfold naturally. Carter and Lena had made their choices. Now they were living with them, just as I was living with mine. The difference was, I could sleep peacefully at night, knowing I'd done the right thing for my children and myself. They would spend years trying to rebuild the lives they'd destroyed with their lies and selfishness. Justice, I discovered, was a dish best served publicly.